Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Boutique Care Homes and the project team, a very warm welcome to this online webinar to discuss emerging development proposals for the Lawnfield site. My name is Philip Cawthorne of Chess Engage, and we're leading on stakeholder and community engagement within the project team. And with me this evening is David Lobb of Boutique Care Homes and Alex King of Mission Town Planning, the project planning consultant. We will be covering a presentation which includes the background to the site, Boutique Care Homes themselves, who own the site and are both the developer and the operator, the site context, the local need for fit-for-purpose care home provision, the proposals themselves, and the approach which is being taken to the planning aspects of the project, as well as next steps and feedback. We very much welcome comments, as has been said, and questions from local residents, so do please take the opportunity to submit questions during the presentation, which we'll cover at the end. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the project website over the coming days. For anyone who was unable to attend yesterday's face-to-face event, or indeed the live online webinar this evening, this is one of the big benefits of doing this webinar, so anyone will be able to see the same material on the website.
Good afternoon, my name's David Lobb and I work for Boutique Care Homes. Just by way of an introduction, Boutique Care Homes is a family-owned care home business. We specialise in residential and dementia care homes. At the moment we have 3 trading care homes in Surrey, Suffolk and Kent, and we have 3 other sites going through the planning system, and we own a 4th site which we're planning on starting construction later this year. Maidenhead is a town we have identified some time ago, and we're very, very keen to acquire a site there. Hence, we've been very lucky to secure the site, and we do own the site. But where Boutique Care Homes is unique, we are the company that acquire the site. We then work on the planning and the designs of it. We oversee construction and we are the operator. We have been running for the business for a number of years, and the family owners of the business have been in the care sector for nearly 20 years now. So we're an established operator, highly respected, with award-winning care homes.
This is me. Hello. My name's Alex King, as Philip has already introduced me, and I'm a town planner. I have more years experience than I already want to think about, but that's the introduction to me. So this is the site which you all probably know better than I, obviously being local to it, but it's delineated there in the red line, and there are some pictures there to show the general state of occupancy of the site as a whole. So the site's obviously on the corner there of the Bath Road to the north, and then Westmoreland to the, I was going to say left, but that doesn't make any sense, does it? No, that would be to the west, obviously. As a planner, one of my failings is not being able to determine my lefts and my rights, so it's never a good start, really. But the site is there. It's well covered, it's well screened. The buildings on site are, they probably haven't had the best care and are sort of falling into a little bit of a state of disrepair. The site, as David has said, has been acquired by Boutique with a view of locating a care home on it. The site itself is one of the bigger sites in the area, as you can see, comparative to the adjacent plots there. You've got, with its location on the Bath Road, you've got sort of more commercial enterprises as you go towards the town centre to the east, and there are sort of larger flatted blocks on the northern side of Bath Road there. So that's, and there's the site's obviously covered with and bounded by a number of trees, foliage, that sort of thing, and has it's also subject to a tree preservation order, which is obviously formed a key part of our thinking as we've brought the site forward. If we could go to the next slide, please. David, shall I sort of cover this? Would that be?
Yes, do you want to carry on with that one, please?
Yes, no problem at all. So the need for care homes in general is nationally established. Local planning policies now have a statutory requirement to consider care homes when they're looking at their overall delivery of housing numbers. Specific to Maidenhead, one of the key driving factors for the council as a whole is to look at the delivery of care homes, as there is a shortage of purpose-built care homes. And while there are some within the borough, they generally tend to occupy buildings which are sort of not fit for purpose, and ones which will struggle as we move forward to meet with the Care Quality Commission standards. Boutique care, as David's already said, have a desire to build the best quality care homes that they can, meeting with the best of the CQC standards and providing the best form of accommodation. One of the key factors in looking at this will also be the need for dementia care, and this will be one of the driving factors for this scheme. It presents different challenges to your more standard care homes or end-of-life homes. Obviously, you need to make sure that places are very safe and secure, both for future occupants and for the people working there. Looking at the demographics there that have been provided by Knight and Frank, you can see that the UK sort of population projections for the 65 plus is sort of going to hit sort of 16 to 17 million, and the research sort of used to suggest that by 2030 you'd be looking sort of circa 20 to 25% of the population at retirement age or over, assuming an average retirement age of around 65. Obviously that will go up slightly, but the more of an issue is those living beyond 80 that do require specialist care, and that really does go to look at the sort of the real pressing need for care homes, because this has been a sort of a much missed aspect of development and delivery overall. And we've obviously, Boutique Care Home have obviously worked very hard to identify a site that really fits within this, is within a settlement boundary, is within an area of where they can attract the best employees and ultimately provide a really excellent setting for future occupants. So that's sort of that sets very briefly the need. It's obviously a very complex matter, and I could probably talk a lot more about it, but I don't think anyone really wants to hear it too much. So if we go to the next slide, please. So why this one?
So just the identified undersupply of care beds or fit for purpose care beds, future-proof, is there's a need for 243 new care beds. What we mean by that is purpose-built care homes, all with ensuite wet rooms. And as we all have come through the COVID period and the pandemic, we have learned the need for purpose-built care homes. So the infection control and the way they're operated is stronger than ever. We have large dining areas where the residents can eat, should they want to eat with everybody else, but we also have smaller areas. We have the bedrooms are designed large enough that should a resident choose to eat in their bedroom, that they can. So the homes are purpose built. They offer a considerable range of facilities, and we've analysed the existing stock of care beds in Maidenhead, and as can be seen from the pie chart here, that majority of the care homes in the town are not purpose built, which means they are in converted buildings, older style of buildings. They won't have bathrooms and facilities within the bedrooms. And of the rest, which are the green on the slide, which are purpose built, these are much older purpose built. They are 10 to 20 years old, whereas designs have considerably evolved over the last few years with a better range of facilities in the care homes, which we now offer.
And that would be true also for the Care Quality Commission standards that they provide, wouldn't it, David, in terms of the overall quality that you'd be looking at. It's worth noting that the council's corporate plan, which runs from a period of 2021 to 2026, notes that the borough will have a population of over 28,000 people who are over 65 years old, and there are currently only 20 care homes within the borough. So this is something that's actually stated within the council's own corporate documentation, and that really does go to sort of the heart of driving demand. One of the factors that I should have mentioned is one of the really good key aspects of care home delivery is that it does free up under-occupied housing, and it allows people to move into a safe and secure setting without putting stress or strain on their families who are trying to look after people in sort of disparate places. And the same would also work with putting stress on sort of local care. Sometimes people say that putting a care home somewhere will obviously put stress on local care organisations, but conversely, the opposite is true, because you obviously have a number of people in the same place, which makes it easier to serve them all at once, as opposed to having to go all over the borough and service them individually and look after all their needs. And obviously, you also have highly skilled and qualified people on site at 24/7 to make sure that people have the best care available in what is ultimately a distress purchase, and you can make sure that people have the best quality of life that is available to them for the time they have. Anyway, should we move on to the next slide? So, Dave, do you want to talk about the proposals?
Yes, let me start here. It is a large site, as we passed with our comments. It has got a tree line boundary, so it's got excellent range of, well, basically it's a lovely setting within the site, but it can't be seen hugely from the outside. So we've tried to take into consideration the design of the care home, which you'll see in a moment, which avoids the trees. And we've accommodated at the moment 70 bedrooms in the care home. It is designed over 3 floors. It has a self-contained car park of 21 car parking spaces within the site, which is more than enough for our operational requirements of visitors, visiting health professionals. Staff are actively discouraged from driving, and because we recruit locally, they tend to use public transport, walk or cycle, but we also have, because it's a sustainable location close to the town centre, access to the railway station and that side of it. Boutique care homes offer very much an outward facing facility. Yes, we are a secure care home because we have a duty of care to the safeguarding of our residents, but we actively work with the local community, with our immediate neighbours, with local health organisations, with schools, with nursery schools particularly. We bring in young children to do activities and draw and paint and modelling with the older people, because it helps the elder residents and certainly those with dementia to engage and to do activities with the younger minded people. We do a lot of animal therapy where we bring animals into the care home, because many of the residents at a time when they lived in their own properties would have had animals. And we also do speeches and work with local authorities, local organisations. So we do dementia awareness talking. We talk people about the health benefits of a care home, and we do speaking outside in local community groups like the Women's Institute, as the U3A, and we integrate as much as we possibly can with the local community, the local organisations. And during last evening's public consultation in the church hall last night, we did actually have good presence from local organisations that came along to see us. So we've already started engaging, as well as working with the church as well and the church community groups. Have you anything you want to add, Alex?
No, I think you've covered absolutely everything, and obviously that, in conjunction with the slide there, really does sort of bring home the sort of the benefits to the proposal. I think the thing that we would say is that obviously feedback is very, very important, hence we're having this this exhibition, and that this is by no means a fait accompli. It's just to present to you our initial thoughts and conceptions with the scheme to allow us to move forward and work with you as the local people that will have to live around or adjacent to this. So fundamentally, you're very important to this process. And we would certainly, really like you to come on the journey with us in a very positive way. The reason for doing this is to make sure that you understand what we're doing, and that we can understand if there are concerns, how we can address them. So, as David said at the beginning, it's very important that you ask questions throughout this process, just to make sure that you are as informed as you can be, and to allow us to address those and answer those, and if we can, or review them as part of the planning process prior to submitting any application. I think there we go.
Oh, I'll pick this one up. So we have run a pre-application submission with Windsor and Maidenhead Borough Council, and from the feedback we received from the initial designs which we tabled to the planners, they came back and said that they didn't like the one large building which was all designed with the same colour schemes and everything else, and they asked if we could look at ways of reconfiguring the building and changing the exterior setup with different roof levels, where we've got two floors on one part of the building and 3 floors on the other part of the building. We've got different architectural features, different colour schemes, And that is what we've tried to show with this image. Now, this image is a computer generated image, and it's of our latest thought pattern. We've tried to take design ideas from the neighbouring properties on Westmoreland Road as well as Bath Road, and we picked out some of the colour schemes on the adjoining property and some of the styles, and we've tried to replicate it here with this. But this is very much work in progress, and it gives just an indication of our current train of thought as to what the building could look like within the boundaries of the site. Can we have the next slide, please?
I think we've sort of, I'll obviously cover this briefly, but to some extent we've looked at this already. But you can see that the sort of the typologies that we sort of picked out in terms of the computer-generated image that we just shared with you there, and that's obviously just the latest iteration of our thinking, as David's already said. But the area sort of in terms of how it fronts Bath Road is obviously a one character, and then the area in terms of how it fronts Westmoreland is another character. And it's also a large site in an urban area that, you know, could possibly lend itself to redevelopment in the way in which we're proposing to provide for what is fundamentally a much needed development in the area. But the character is mixed. You can see on the northern side of Bath Road, there's sort of large blocks of flats, 3-4 stories. Some of them are products of their time in design terms. And obviously, to the rear of our site, to the south, there's obviously a development where you've seen backland development, and to the east, you've obviously got the sort of the town centre as well. So the sort of the context of the site is one of mixed area, but through the design iterations we're working through, we're really trying very hard to maintain as much of the trees and the foliage as possible, and that's dictating to a large extent how our design moves forward. And where we are forced to remove foliage or trees or whatever, we will obviously look to replace and reinforce. Moving forward at the time of submission, we'll also obviously have biodiversity net gain to deal with, so it's in our own interest to try and maintain as much as possible, but obviously we will also need to reinforce it to be in accordance with national legislation in that regard. So that's really sort of like an overview of the context. But what we're trying to do is to create a large residential type building in an area that has this sort of typology within it. We're not trying to sort of parachute in something that we would be completely out of character or an alien addition. And we'd very much like your feedback and comments on how you think we're doing, or what you think, you know, we should be looking at, or other examples of things you think we should see. So that's really the context. And obviously, those sort of viewing this in what part of this team will be far more aware of the context and what they think should be there. So again, feedback is important. So if you could, next slide, there we go. And that's the...
Okay, so this is the latest incarnation of the layout. This is the 4th different design we've had. This one is the latest thinking, as I mentioned, but it's of a particularly unusual shape, because on the north, but looking at that plan, to use Alex's analogy, it's on the left-hand side of the plan, we have a substantial oak tree on the site, and we believe could be as much as 250 years old. So what we've done is carefully design the building, moving outside the tree canopy, moving outside the root protection area, and we've tried to make the gardens wrap around the tree, so it becomes an absolute feature when you walk into the care home, and you will see it in the gardens on our northern side adjoining Bath Road. The dense foliage you can see here is actually where Bath Road is, which has got very, very heavy existing screening and a mix of trees and different species, but with the signature oak. So just to talk you through the floor plan, you can see the blue areas are the public, they are the day spaces. So when you walk into our large open airy light reception area, you walk through to the cafe bistro, which is where our residents congregate during the day, have their morning coffee and their cakes, read the papers, and we do a lot of activities and things in that area as well. And that is open for the families of the residents to come in and join them and enjoy teas and coffees and things. And then the other blue areas slightly to the right on the plan, or just above, are the lounges and the residents' dining areas, and the purple are the bedrooms shown on this floor. So you can see from the site context, we've moved the entrance away from Bath Road, so there's better sight lines from an access point of view, and we've lined up the entrance so it doesn't cause issues with the residents on Westmoreland Road on the opposite side of the road. And so we've also screened the entrance. We've worked on where there's a sensible place in the hedgerow and the tree line to put the new vehicle entrance, which is slightly down the road from where the existing entrance is to the site. And then upon entering our site, you come in and there's the large car park. It is carefully designed so that it's got sufficient car parking spaces for the visitors, the visitors and the visiting professionals and the medical staff, as well as there's ambulances and disabled spaces. We do get ambulances visiting a care home, as you'd appreciate, and the car park is designed so that they can come in very easily. There's a decent place for them to turn around and park, all within the constraints of the site, so that they can pick up and drop off residents as required. The car park has also been designed so that the refuse truck, which is the largest vehicle that visits our sites, enters the site frontwards. It has sufficient area and space to turn around to collect the bins and then exit the site frontwards again. So there's no reversing onto the roads, there's no accident hazards from that point of view. And then people always want to know about our deliveries and delivery frequencies. We have a van pretty similar in size to people's domestic Tesco food deliveries, and that will bring us fresh food and produce for our chef to prepare the dinners on a daily basis. And then once a week or once a fortnight, we would have a slightly larger delivery vehicle, which is just bringing the non-perishable foods and supplies into the care home. But the whole site is designed in a self-contained manner. We've got gardens on 3 sides of the care home. We actively encourage our residents to spend as much time as possible outside for the benefits of natural light and vitamin D and sunshine and fresh air, which is good for everybody's well-being and just makes people feel better. You will notice in the gardens on one side of the care home that we have almost an oval circular walk, and that is literally designed so the residents, should they desire, can do laps and they can walk round and they can get their exercises, and there will be various places within that walkway for them to stop and get their breath and to take a rest. There will be benches, there will be a destination summer house, there will be different interactive things that they can do there in the garden with different surfaces and raised flower beds. We work very carefully with planting so that there's lots of aromas and lots of colours, and so it's basically just a really pleasant place to be. And we actively encourage the residents to sit out there and enjoy the fresh air and the benefit of the gardens.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Alex. Back to me. In terms of next steps, I'd say first of all that boutique care homes are committed to a comprehensive programme of community engagement. Last month saw the launch of the project website. We're engaging now, as we've heard, with local stakeholders, including the Boyne Hill Ward councillors, the Maidenhead Neighbourhood Forum and All Saints Church. This online webinar follows a face-to-face consultation last night, which took place at All Saints Church Hall. The feedback we're receiving will inform the development proposals, which are still very much work in progress, leading towards submission of the planning application later in the summer. Next slide, please. And in terms of feedback, there are a variety of means by which you can submit feedback. At the end of this webinar, you'll receive a pop-up message with the opportunity to provide feedback directly. And you can also do so via the project website, of course, or indeed contact us directly by phone. Next slide, please. And now on to the Q&A session. Again, thank you very much to David and Alex for your input thus far. We've had quite a number of questions, so thank you very much to those of you who have submitted them. Do keep them coming, but let's get as many in as we can in the time we've got. I'm going to make a start with a couple that we've had around the word speculative, which was picked up on by one of our viewers earlier on. So in terms of what does speculative mean, what benefit does being an operator mean being involved at this stage? don't all planning applications involve operators? Was one question we've had. I wonder whether I could perhaps ask you, David, to make a start on that.
Yes, this isn't a speculative application. Boutique Care Homes actually own the site. We bought it specifically because we believe it is suitable and sustainable for one of our care homes, and we designed from day one to operate the care home. We're not a developer, we are the operator, and that's the big difference. So everything we do from now on is to deliver the best quality of care home that we possibly can for the area, and most important, for the residents. So I would just say that this is not speculative. We're very serious. We own the site, and now we're working with both the general public as part of this consultation process. We're taking on feedback. We received quite a lot of feedback last night, which we are now taking into consideration when we're coming up with the final incarnations of the design, which we will, as Philip said, ready for hopefully planning submission within the next couple of months.
Thank you, David, for that answer. Another question relates to what you were saying earlier about this being the fourth design in terms of proposals. Could you say a little bit more about the changes that have taken place as a result of that engagement with a local authority to get to the point we're at now?
No problems at all. Well, the initial designs for this particular site was to do a T-shaped care home. It was operational, that works very well indeed. And the long side of the T was actually running parallel with Bath Road. But the planners said that they didn't like the fact that there are two listed buildings directly on the north side of Bath Road, and they were worried about the impact on those listed buildings, and they asked if we could settle the building further back into the site, moving away from Bath Road. But then once we completed our really detailed tree survey and tree report of the entire site, we took the decision to move the building away from a T, and we looked at different shaped buildings to fit within the site to give the maximum number of car parking spaces we could. And we also looked to move the buildings away from the to the immediate south of us, where a single house has at some point been demolished and 3 new houses have been built in its place. And one of those is very close to the boundary, and their access road is going down the side of our piece of land. So what we've done is we've moved our building with further into our site with no windows which overlook the neighbours to the south, and we staggered the building so it's got less visual impact on them. So basically the building's been moved away from Bath Road on one side and away from the properties to the south. So it's squeezed in the middle a little bit, which is why we've done it for the Y configuration.
Right, so a number of changes along the way. Thank you for that, David. We've got some further questions around whether this will be solely a dementia care home, and what the cost will be. Will it be council or will it be private? Okay,
well, I can take those questions. Basically, we are a residential and dementia care home operator. We are aiming at the private fee payer market. There are plenty of care homes already within Maidenhead which deal with local authority referrals, but this one is aimed at the private fee payer market. We offer people care when they are no longer able to safely live on their own. So the average age of somebody moving into one of our care homes is between 89 and 90 years old. And the people come into the care home for a variety of reasons. Some of them may struggle to cook and look after themselves in that way with the weights of saucepans. Some of them may find it difficult to make cups of tea because of the weight of a kettle, struggling with the washing and the cleaning. So they move into the care home, which is a completely safe environment where the laundry is done for you, the food's cooked for you, prepared for you, but they still live an active, engaged life with the various activities and the clubs and the different activities we do throughout the day in the care home. So the ground floor of the care home is very much aimed at what we class as the residential community. Then on the first floor, we're acutely aware that dementia and dementia care is one of the greatest need in the UK. With the ageing population, the need for dementia facilities is getting more and more. So what we do is a secure community on the first floor, which is the dementia community, because owing to the needs and requirements for the safety of a dementia resident, it has to be a locked, secure community. And it has a range of facilities on the first floor, very similar to the ground floor. It has multiple lounges, multiple activities rooms, multiple dining areas, some large, some small, because some residents do like the social interaction of dining with others, but some dementia residents prefer to dine on their own, but not in their bedroom, but actually in a smaller dining area. We have quiet lounges, we have activity lounges, we have a range of facilities on the dementia floor. And then this particular care home is designed so it's 3 stories on the furthest point away from our neighbouring properties, then it drops down to 2 floors. And where there is a 3-floor part of the building, in that area, we will have another row of bedrooms for dementia or residential care. And it really depends on what the market needs are within Maidenhead as to whether we should have additional dementia rooms or additional residential beds. And it literally we respond to the market as the market grows and as the demand for our care home grows.
Thank you. A couple more questions in relation to outward facing and what that means. There's quite a lot of interest in that and what that might look like in practice, possibly what happens elsewhere as well. And just one other question at the same time. I know someone who might be interested in this. How do we go about registering? So
okay, well, the organisations that want to work with us can certainly register with us now as a company, and we'll hold those details. You can register us through the website, come in through Philip and his organisation to us. But what we do is during the construction phase, we appoint the manager at least 6 months before the end of the build programme, and that manager's sole job is to integrate in the local community. We will go and see the local nursery schools, we'll go and see the local primary schools, we'll go and see the local church organisations and the church clubs. We'll integrate with the U3A and the Women's Institute. We'll go and see the local medical organisations and societies. Then we will we do both inward and outward facing. So we do a lot of talks on dementia and Alzheimer's and how to identify it, because unfortunately every one of us on this webinar this evening has probably got a personal story about a family member that has been touched by dementia. We all need to learn more, and we need to identify it earlier so we can get the necessary help for those people. So we do a lot of talks within the care home and invite the general public in and our neighbours in and organisations in, but we also go out and do special cafe sessions. And one of our care homes in Kent at the moment is actually working in conjunction with a local band, and we are doing a reminiscence music evening in a local theatre in Broadstairs in Kent, so that we can actually take our dementia residents actually out into the theatre environment so they get a wonderful experience in the theatre, but we're also bringing in the general public so that they can participate and see it and everything else. So it's both outward facing, as in we go out into the community and with the organisations, but we're not a closed door care home, so we actively invite people in so we can work with them.
Thank you. And a brief supplementary on that. I've got a question here about whether the general public will be able to come to the bistro and use it.
The general public can't come in unless they have a connection with the care home, because we need to maintain the security and the safety of the residents. The residents are paying to reside into the care home, so we can't just let people walk in the street and use our facilities, but we can when we work in conjunction with an organisation. And I think that's the absolute key. It's working with an organisation to integrate into the community, and that's how we operate.
Thank you, David. A couple more, little more of a planning nature, really. What surveys will be part of this application in terms of the submission? And when will a decision be made on this? How long will the construction take place? Are we okay with those on the surveys,
yeah.
Alex?
There's a few questions there, aren't there?
There are, so I've got them here.
So basically, when you submit a planning application, there is a national validation checklist and a local one. So we would submit all of the reports that are required. But for example, you would have transport, drainage, flooding. We'd probably have a needs survey. You'd have a design and access survey, tree survey, ecology survey. Depending where schemes are located, we could be looking at air quality or noise. So they would be the sort of standard ones. Obviously, the most important ones are the planning statement, obviously, and the community engagement statement or statement of community involvement, very important statements those as well. So they're the ones that would really support, and they would outline the sort of technical requirements, how we've got to where we've got to, how we've sort of justified where we are. David earlier mentioned the sort of the parking, and obviously, travel plans will form a big part of this, and that's generally an interest area for a lot of people in terms of because obviously it's change. So they're the sort of the basic reports that would be submitted with the application. And then in terms of how long will an application take to be determined, well, in theory, from a legislative point of view, the application should take 13 weeks to determine in what's called a major application. Due to local authority funding, resource issues, all those sorts of things. I mean, in reality, you're probably looking 16 to 20 weeks. And I would imagine a scheme of this scale, depending on the council scheme of delegation, will be determined at a planning committee. So you'd be looking at probably a planning committee decision whereby ideally everything would be recommended and everyone would be singing the scheme's praises, but there may be opportunities for people if they have concerns to raise them at that planning committee. And then obviously there'll be opportunities for the developer, planning consultant, David, myself, whoever to talk as well. So that's generally how the decision will be made, and they're generally the sort of documents that will be used to support the application and its submission.
Thank you, Alex. The final part of that, and forgive me for throwing through it, the final part was how long will the construction take in due course? What's the build
Shall I
period?
take that one? Because I'm probably slightly closer to it. There's a lot of preparation that goes into it before we start site, what with the demolition clearance. Apart from that, we work very closely with our ecologists, and there's only certain times a year we can do certain surveys, and we actually have to be very mindful of that. We can't start any work on the site unless our arboricultural consultants on site, as we fence off the root protection areas to look after the trees that are around the boundary. So there's a lot of setting up and things that go on behind the scenes. So once planning's hopefully granted, we still have to go through that pre-construction period, which can take several months in all honesty to get the timings right and everything lined up. Boutique has actually partnered up with a very established construction company. They build all of our care homes. They've built all 3 to date. They start on our 4th care home this winter, and then in the spring they start on number 5. So we will also work it into the program for when they're available to come and work on site. But from arriving physically on site to commence the construction, it is likely to take somewhere around 20 to 21 months. It is not a quick period due to the complexities of the construction of the care home.
Thank you,
I think
David.
there's another point to add to that as well, David, in the sense that the guys who you use to develop the care homes always have like a designated site manager, and to become a site manager you have to be incredibly experienced, but they'll make sure that they are the point of contact for all residents and neighbours locally. So anyone who has any concern or if there's any issues, you know who to approach. And I think that's a really good and important point to make, especially in the way that Boutique have chosen their development partners, in the sense that that they want to work with their neighbours, because fundamentally, once the developers have left, the neighbours are still there. And that process, as David has already highlighted, by having the care home manager appointed at least 6 months prior to completion, that neighbourliness is really sort of enshrined in how Boutique want to move forward.
I would go one stage further with the site manager, because we actually make a point that he introduces himself to all of the immediate neighbours all the way around, and then he'll communicate regularly. If people have concerns about when is the demolition, what is going on this week, what big equipment's going to be arriving, is there any big equipment, he will actually be able to give people this information pretty well on a week by week basis of what is likely to be going on that construction site. We're experienced at that. Our contractors are even more experienced than we are. We oversee them, and everybody is keeping an eye on the site. But we want as trouble-free construction as we can possibly have, causing the minimal impact and inconvenience to our neighbours.
Thank you for that, David and Alex. A question around the issue of assets for residents who come to live at boutique care homes. The question here is about whether, or rather what happens when the individual concerned runs out of assets. Is there not a danger that individual becomes then a cost for the local authority? Does that happen in practice? Is that a problem?
No, it's not a problem, because we have to be very, very thorough with our financial checks and our checks when somebody is wanting to move into a care home. We need to make sure that they have got allocated funds, which is going to cater for a pretty good time period should they manage to hopefully enjoy a long and fulfilled life once they've moved into the care home. But we have to be cautious in our approach to that, and so far within our existing care homes we've not had that situation, but it's something we're aware of, and we do undertake a lot of checks before a resident moves in, because we have to safeguard both ourselves and the residents, because the last thing we want is a family member or a resident suddenly really concerned that their funds are running low, but their respective parent absolutely adores it in the hotel, in the care home, and doesn't want to leave. So we do have to be very mindful and thorough in our checks before a resident moves in.
Thank you, David. And I've just had a question in now. Can I just say, do keep the questions coming. Got another one here about parking and the parking provision on site, and how have we arrived at the number of parking spaces that we're stating for the emerging development proposals.
I'll take that one, David, if that's all right. So yeah. The parking number is basically derived from the staffing and the servicing of the care home itself. It is very, very rare that a resident of the care home would have any form of public transport, just due to the nature and the safety and security of the environment that boutique are trying to create. So, and obviously with 24-hour provision, we've got circa 21 spaces, and obviously we're in a fairly, for a development of this type, we're in a very sustainable location. So the numbers really derived from boutique's experience and also the experience of their transport consultants. So this wouldn't just be based on boutique's experience, it would be based on other care homes' experience, and it would say, you know, look at a myriad number of care homes to derive a figure. And boutique are good in the sense that they'll get that figure, and then they'll usually just add some to it, just so there's some degree of flexibility. So say if you have like a bank holiday or those sorts of things where there's more likely to be more family members in attendance, the number there would sort of derive from that. So that's how the number is derived. And generally speaking, I mean, I've worked in the care sector for 15 years. I've never ever been to a care home where I've seen the car park full, and I've been at weekends, I've been in a week and all that sort of thing. And I know that's just me, but I do work in the sector, and I've probably visited more care homes than someone in the general public generally, just because of what I do for a living.
I mean, what I'd also add to that is our residents move in from the area. They're not coming in from towns miles and miles apart. They are probably already residents of Maidenhead. Their families will be in Maidenhead. Therefore, if the respective parents are relocating into our care home, the chances are the family members also live within the locality. So when they want to come and visit their parents, they may not need to use a car at all. They might live within walking distance. It's not automatically guaranteed that people are going to drive. And sadly, due to the age of the people coming into the care home and the challenges of dementia and actually visiting somebody with dementia, which is or can be quite disturbing for family members, sadly our residents don't get as many visitors as we would really like. But the car parking spaces are there should they be needed for visitors, also should they be needed for visiting professionals and such like. I was at one of our bigger care homes in Shepperton last week, where it's got 78 bedrooms, and it's got a similar number of car parking spaces to what we have here. It's another sustainable location, very, very similar in a residential road like this. And at the time of my visit, which was 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, there were 8 available spaces in the car park, and they had lots of activities going on and quite a few family members in the home at the time of my visit. So there are always the availability of parking spaces within our care homes. We also work very closely on green travel plans. We actively encourage our staff to use public transport, to use cycling, to use walking. We have secure bike parks on our care home sites, and we actively engage and encourage our staff these days to travel in a sustainable manner wherever possible.
Thank you, David. Okay, further question we've had in now about the visual impact and the impact it will have on neighbouring properties on the eastern side. Can you say something about that, please?
Yes, I can. If it's just picture in my mind, yes, right, okay, eastern side. There are a row of, there's a garage at the front on the top of the eastern side. Then there are three houses to the rear, I believe, from memory. Now those houses are slightly further down. They are lower than actually our particular site, and we've got a very, very tall row of sycamore trees on our boundary. So our boundary is higher than theirs, but we've got the trees and we've got fences. So we've got a fence line which will be maintained and improved, if not totally replaced and rebuilt, because I've got a feeling in places it's looking a little tired. So there will be a new boundary fence put there. We will maintain and enhance and look after the trees. And the building is actually positioned away from those properties. And I met one of the immediate neighbours last night, and we actually went through the various plans that we've got for the care home. We don't have overlooking issues. The building is set some considerable meters back across our site, and then you've got the trees on the boundary, so there won't be overlooking issues. And due to the height difference and the size of the fences we'll put on the boundary, that there won't be any issues where our residents are looking into the neighbouring properties' gardens or into the neighbours' houses themselves. And we're quite confident of that due to the depth of the landscaping. And there are various parts of the gardens, which is actually on that eastern boundary is a very, very large composting area at the moment, which will be our main garden. Therefore, that area will be completely changed, re-landscaped and enhanced. So I genuinely, because of the tree screening and the planting that we'll be using, is there won't be any visual impact on the residents who live on our eastern side.
I think it's also worth talking about the because the building is unusual in its design, in the sense that it's that sort of Y shape. So it also pulls away from the boundary. It also means that any windows that may have a perception of overlooking will be oblique. So they will be looking sort of diagonally across, which is unusual. But it also means that it completely sort of nullifies that sort of impact or perceived impact to privacy. The way in which it will be set out is really been very well considered, I think. Obviously, I'm going to say that to some extent, but it has been well considered by the architect who's put the scheme together to make sure that it both fulfills boutiques' needs, the needs of future occupants who will be very well cared for, and obviously, most fundamentally, and I've sort of laboured this point probably too much, the neighbouring properties that are adjacent. And I think the other thing you need to bear in mind when thinking about what the impact of the building is what is the use of the building. The building is a care home. The building will be managed by a single entity who will probably hopefully be known by the neighbours in the sense of the care home manager. And generally speaking, care homes are very good neighbours. You've got a single point of contact. You've got neighbours who are going to be probably quieter. You're not going to have loud parties every night, that type of thing. So I would hope that, given the area that it is in and the high architectural quality, that this scheme would hopefully fit fairly seamlessly in and be a very good neighbour for years to come.
What I would also add Sorry, what I'd also add there, thank you, Alex, was I understand that some of the sycamore trees on the eastern boundary do overhang into the gardens and cause quite a lot of shadowing within the gardens because they are slightly lower down than us. And those trees will be maintained and looked after. And if the respective neighbours have got any issues during the construction phase, when we've got larger equipments and the tree consultants are on site, we'll be more than happy to come round, look at your gardens from your side and see what we need to do to the trees to enhance. I also understand there's quite a sloping bank which comes from the end of your garden up towards the care home. And again, we will make sure that everything is safe on both sides. So there's minimal impact no matter what we do with our new landscaping. But the trees along that boundary will be remaining because they give each of us respectively screening.
Thank you both for your responses there. We're beginning to run out of time and questions actually, but I do have one final one that I'm going to put to you that I've just had, and that's just the impact that such a proposal has potentially on GP practices with waiting lists as they are and pharmacies and what have you. How does it work in practice with boutique care homes elsewhere? Is that a problem?
No, I can take that. It isn't a problem because we deal with the prescriptions and the ordering of prescriptions should residents need antibiotics. We work in conjunction with Boots, the chemist. We don't put pressure on our local Boots. We deal with Boots centrally in their head office, and everything is done through mail order. They mail order the drugs for the or the required medicines for the residents. They do it on a monthly basis, and it's all done through mail order. So there's no stress or strain on the local chemists at all. And then on top of that, because most of our residents come from the community, they will already be registered with local doctors. So they've got the option when they move in to the care home to stay with their existing doctors, and it actually solves pressure. Whereas a doctor may need to go around and see a number of elderly residents in their respective houses in different locations, should one particular doctor's practice have 4, 5, 6 residents living within our care home, it actually makes it much more time efficient for all parties, for the doctor to actually come into the care home and hold a bit of a mini surgery. So we do not put pressure on local health services, but we're always keen to work with the local health services to help address any issues or concerns they may have.
I think it's worth pointing out that anecdotally, various government reports in terms of the Happy report, which is one that deals with care homes, and the government sort of task force in this matter. I think it's something like 80% of residents of care homes in general come within a 5-mile radius of where they're from, and then those that are, the 20% that don't, are generally moved down by family members who already have existing connections to practices, etc. And I think I already covered this in the needs section, and David's sort of done a far more erudite version of that than I presented earlier. But I think there is this sort of misnomer that care homes or things where you have a concentration of people that have needs or that sort of thing will put additional pressure, when in reality the converse is true, and it's actually reducing pressure because it allows, as David's already said, doctors to hold sort of like mini surgeries. And also you do have qualified practitioners, nursing practitioners on site. And there's also the other social issues that we sort of often forget, in terms of a lot of people who move into care homes are historically lonely. They have been on their own for some time. The improvement of sort of well-being, of being with other people, of being, having the cafes, having the facilities there, having the ability to not worry about the sort of the cleaning as much as you would do as if you're on your own, and you can't manage. Those sort of psychological elements are really important. And then obviously you've got the gardens, which are, it's really beneficial because they're going to be maintained. The sort of visual aspect, the ecological aspect is obviously very important to boutique care. Yes, because it provides an excellent service and creates a great shop window for them, but also for residents that being able to look out on something and that visual amenity to really sort of improve their well-being. I don't think that can be understated either. So there are things that happen within care homes that do increase people's general sense of well-being, both sort of psychologically, environmentally, that sort of thing. And I think that can't be understated.
Indeed. Thank you, Alex and David. Well, I'm going to draw this webinar to a close now. We're out of questions and pretty much out of time as well. I would like to thank David and Alex for their contributions, and indeed our residents who have given us so many questions. We've had a good discussion this evening. Thank you for watching the webinar and for these questions. We do hope you found it beneficial. Do take the opportunity to ask any further questions and provide feedback. I'd remind you that the project website is lawnfieldmaidenhead.co.uk. We value your feedback greatly in helping to shape our approach to development proposals moving forward. So once again, thank you very much and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.